Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
I'm Scott Warr. I'm going to pose a question to the audience. Why does the same workout leave some people feeling energized while others feel completely drained? Today, we're going to be exploring the physical stress, and we'll maybe put in some psychological, emotional stress in there too, but we're exploring the physical stress caused by exercise and how it impacts our bodies. We're joined by Dr. Phil Maffetone. He's a leading expert in health and endurance training to discuss and help us understand how we manage this stress in our bodies and how our bodies can respond to this stress that can lead us hopefully to better performance and better recovery. If you don't know Dr. Phil Maffetone, Phil, I don't know if you know this, I think you may be a leading guest on Trail Runner Nation 18 times. This is your 19th time on Trail Runner Nation. Going back, I think as early as 2013 is when you first appeared on our show.
Wow. Thanks, Scott. I'm impressed. 18. Wow, I have a hard time counting up that high.
You need to take your socks off to count that high.
Well, I've got my socks off. I've got my barefoot shirt on, and I'm ready to go. Thanks, Scott and Don. And Ryan is hiding out down there in the dark, but he's making us sound good and
yes,
and appear good. Do you guys do this video as a video?
We do now.
Okay,
yep,
good.
Yep.
Good.
We do the unedited version. We post on Facebook, not Facebook, YouTube. So and some people like to listen or watch that. I don't know why, but it's becoming a growing portal for content. So who knows?
They're getting bored with the regular podcasts, which have taken over the world.
Yeah.
And it's a little sad because everybody has a podcast, and it kept me from doing a podcast because I just thought, wow, there's too many.
you were on all of them. So
Phil, this is your podcast. You've been on it 18 times. This is your podcast. I think, Don, when we discussed this, you were going to have the first question. You said, "Oh, I got the first question," and I didn't ask what the question was.
Well, that
you said you were going to have the first question on stress.
And really, that's what makes it fun, especially with Phil. As you know, all you have to do is bring up one word, and we can have a complete episode. and so when I think about stress, the first thing that came to my mind was stress is bad, stress is negative, avoid stress at all costs. But then again, maybe stress is necessary and relevant, that in any big change that happens in our body, any change that happens with society, you can look at the catalyst, many times can be stress. And you can point to an event or to an action that started it. And so as we talk about stress, I kind of wanted to hit on, there's two sides of the coin on stress. There's good stress and bad stress. And how do we recognize it and how do we manage it? I know that wasn't my first question, Scott, but that's kind of the context that I'm thinking about stress. And with that, I hit it back over to Phil to find a question in there.
You're going to leave it open-ended like that with Dr. Phil?
Yes.
Okay, Phil, do something with that.
Let's talk about dissonant chords.
Yes.
So yes, you mentioned the word stress, and all of a sudden, people, shriek inside. They think of the negative, as you said, and what it means is that people don't really understand what stress truly is. And so there's a couple of things that we need to talk about. Think of stress as the wicked witch of the north, and then there's the witch of the east. There's good stress and there's bad stress. And like with everything else, we need to balance those. If we have too much bad stress, we're in trouble because it's going to have an adverse effect on our health, all around our health and all over our fitness. But still, when you think of that word stress, okay, I understand there's good stress. There's love, falling in love. That's a stress. It's a good stress. Joy, we cry with joy. That's a good stress. But let's look at that word stress holistically, to get the real true picture of what stress is, because a lot of people have no clue that this is the situation. There are three kinds of stressors. There's physical stress, there's biochemical stress or metabolic stress, and there's mental emotional stress, which is what people think of when the word stress comes up.
Yep.
And to give a common example in the running community, think of knee pain. That's a physical stress. It's gonna uh, uh, do it. It causes pain. It's gonna do other things. There's a domino effect. It causes your gait to be irregular, which then causes other problems, and on and on and on. But there's a biochemical component to that knee pain. If you have pain, you have inflammation, most likely. So that inflammation um, is going to change the joint. It's going to affect the biochemistry of the joint and really your whole body. And there's a good chance your whole body is inflamed, but that joint is inflamed, and you can correct that joint physically. But if you don't correct the inflammatory component, the problem's just going to come back. And it's the most common problem in runners with knee pain is the problem comes back, or they just shift it to the other side because now you're adapting, which is an important thing to do in stress. But your gait is shifting, and you've moved your weight bearing to the other side, and that's an advanced lecture. But the so that's the physical, and then we have the biochemical inflammation that's part of stress. And then what about the mental emotional part of stress? Well, that knee is sending messages up to the emotional areas of the brain, which it interprets as pain. Pain is an emotion. And you all know that when we have an injury, we're annoyed mentally, we're frustrated, we get angry. Why does this always happen to me? So, so there's physical, biochemical, and mental emotional stressors. And the name of the game in controlling stress, that's what we want to do, because stress will hurt you in many, many ways. And this is all, gosh, this is over 100 years old. Hans Selye, when he was a medical student, did research on stress. And what he found was this brain-body connection. The hypothalamus in the brain, the pituitary, and the adrenal gland is called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, one of the axes in the body that makes us adapt to stress, various ways, many, many different ways. And the name of the game, in addition to the balance issue, is getting rid of too much stress. And we all have too much stress. And how do we get rid of some of that stress? That's called stress management. But most people think of stress management as taking a course. And I don't know what they teach in these courses, but here's how I teach it. You take the three types of stress: physical, biochemical, which means metabolic, your food is there, caffeine, alcohol, and then mental, emotional. And you make a list of all the physical stresses that you have. Well, I've been wearing these shoes for 3 months now. They don't fit very well, but I paid for them, so I got to get through this. Well, 7 cups of coffee a day. Yeah, I think that might be a little too much. Emotional stress. Well, I hate my job. I hate my boss. I hate commuting. I hate having to find a parking. Make a list of it could take you several days, most likely. Make a list of all your physical stress, all your biochemical stresses, and all your mental, emotional stresses. And now look at the ones that you can just cross off and get rid of. You could buy new shoes that fit. What a deal. I mean, you could eat better. You can reduce your caffeine intake. You can, you know, talk to your significant other. You could tell your boss he's a jerk, and one of two things will happen: he'll thank you or fire you. Either way, you're so much better off. So that's in a nutshell. That's the stress list that I talk about in my writings, in my books for decades.
Hey, Phil, both you and Don have more of a medical background and background in human physiology, and so maybe both of you can answer this question. The what was the second one?
Biochemical.
Biochemical stress.
Biochemical. I just use that word as a general encompassing word for food and chemicals, and our metabolism is there and all that stuff in the body.
Well, the one thing that you mentioned specifically in your example was knee inflammation. So you've done something to stress the knee. The body is responding with inflammation.
Which is chemical, which is biochemical.
Is that something that we should let the body, that's the body's way of healing, and we should let that inflammation progress on its natural course? Or should we start popping pills and anti-inflammatory things to reduce the inflammation, hoping that the joint will get better? I've always wondered, should you address the problem or let the body take its natural course to solve the problem?
Well, it's always good to let the body take its natural course, but I don't want to start popping pills because you don't know what the cause of the knee pain is. And that's what we want to address. We don't want to treat symptoms. And so we think we have a brain, this incredible brain, the best in the animal
Some of us
kingdom.
do. Some of us have brains.
I wasn't going to say that.
Some of us don't.
Thank you for intervening with. We need to think, where does that come from? Is it from below the knee, which often it is in a runner? And then when it comes to the inflammatory part, is the inflammation in the knee joint part of a chronic inflammation problem, which is body-wide? If that's the case, then that's a serious biochemical condition, because in addition to menial problems like knee pain, it is also the first stage of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all kinds of chronic illness.
Interesting.
And so we now start this is what I did when I would work with athletes. I would sit down and I'd listen to all these things. And in my brain, I would start putting it was a puzzle, putting these things together. Oh, knee pain. Oh, there's probably inflammation. Well, yes, I palpate the knee and it's swollen and hot. Okay, where did that come from? Well, this person has a history of these inflammatory conditions. So, okay, maybe there's a full body inflammation. Okay, we're going to measure this person's waist and compare it to their height. Oh, now we're finding out their body has excess stored fat, which is something that produces inflammation better than anything except for sugar, which produces inflammation really well. And so that you sort of have to put all this together, but it's a good question, because we have to stop treating symptoms and treat the cause. Otherwise, the problem never really goes away.
You'd be stuck on popping pills.
Yes. And I would always ask an athlete who had pain, how did you feel after you took aspirin or some other anti-inflammatory? And if they said it felt better, then I immediately know there was inflammation there, because they took an anti-inflammatory, it got better temporarily, and then it came back. The aspirin wore off. And that was probably 90% of the time. That's what would happen, is the patient had inflammation. It's typically chronic inflammation. There's a big body. There's a big picture in the body. Sometimes the body's big too. And you you can't zero in on the knee because it doesn't work, and that's where healthcare has gone. We've got all these specialists, so if it's your left knee, you go to a left knee specialist to get it taken care of.
Not the right knee one. You don't
Not
want
the
to go
right knee
in.
one, because they don't know anything about the left knee.
Scott, I think that was such a good question, and I really appreciate Phil's position and answer on it. And I'm not opposing to it. I'm just speaking around it. If you're 98.6 and you end up with a fever, your body spiked that fever for a reason. So should we try to bring it back down and fight against and argue with the body's instinct to raise that temperature to get rid of the virus or to the bacteria that's infecting it? It raises the body temperature to rid itself of that. That's its protective mechanism. So what are we doing, getting in a bath and putting towels on our head and taking medication to drive a temperature down when the body's trying to do that to save you? And so I think there's I'm just going to say this, that sometimes I think there's a switch. The body doesn't have a lot of control on it. It just hits it and goes full force. And it knows it'll probably overcome the problem. You'll probably survive it, and very likely. But I don't think it has. I don't want to get arrogant and think, well, we know better than the body. We should regulate exactly that temperature should be 99. And we'll drive it down. I think the body has a great deal of wisdom, and I think our arrogance gets in the way sometimes. But it's good to understand that there are we need to control things. Things can get out of control. It's good to burn down a forest, but we don't want to let the whole thing burn down. We have to control it.
That's a good point. And when you say we, you're talking about our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the brain is arguing with that, saying, no, we actually do know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to get rid of this virus, this bacteria, this microbe, because we are very aware of what's happened. We're very aware of what we need to do. We know how long it's going to take, and we're doing it. Leave us alone.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention that we've got so much advertising for treating symptoms. And now when we go see a health practitioner, that's all they want to do is treat symptoms. Oh yeah, we'll just give you a cortisone injection. That'll wipe that out. You'll be better. Better than what? So yes, there are times, Don, when we want to let the body heal itself, and the body can do that better than anyone. We just have to let it do it. But if we say, well, let's see, it's Tuesday, I've got a meeting at 10, and then I've got another meeting at 2. I can't stay home, even though I have 102 fever. So I'm going to pop some pills, and I'll bring some with me, and I'll pop them every hour or two. And I'll get through this. And oh yeah, tomorrow it's going to be the same thing. So I can't take off. We have a society that's, it's part of the no pain, no gain thing, actually. And that's a big problem. The exception to that is when it's an emergency, a true emergency.
Mm.
If you're out on the trail and you all of a sudden collapse and you have this massive amount of knee pain, you can't reach in your backpack and grab some aspirin. I know people keep aspirin in their backpacks and they're running fanny packs and so forth, which is kind of silly. But you don't know what's going on there. There could be a fracture there. There could be all kinds of issues. So, or if you're out in the street and you collapse and somebody brings you to the emergency room, they don't know what's going on with you. You don't know what's going on. You can't help them. They're not gonna give you an aspirin. They're not going to give you a cortisone injection. They're going to evaluate you, basically to rule out anything serious. They'll do an X-ray. They'll do a CAT scan. Hopefully, they'll talk to you in the same language so they can get even more information that way, which is really important. And then they'll rule in or out an emergency. And if they rule out the emergency, now typically today they'll say, go home, take some aspirin. We don't know. We're not holistic. We're emergency people. We just know that, which is good. These people are great. But if it's not an emergency, um, you're on your own unless you know a practitioner who's holistic. Not many here in Florida. You got more of them out in California. But that's, you want to look at the big picture, because the knee problem is not a knee problem in most cases.
Yeah, and I want to be careful with my statement to make I don't want to make it sound like don't go to a doctor, just trust your body will heal itself. And that's a recipe for disaster. Sometimes those symptoms are there, early warning signs for a good trained medical provider to recognize a problem that can be solved. So, I mean, I want to do a disclaimer on my statement earlier, but I think we should have confidence in our body's amazing ability to recognize a problem and steer us towards a cure.
Yeah, and two things. One is that knee pain is a symptom that something is wrong, and you got to try to figure it out. And if you can't, find a practitioner who could help you figure it out. Not a practitioner who knows what their therapy is, because that's their specialty, but a practitioner who's going to help you figure it out, like a detective. That's what I was when I worked one-on-one with athletes and other patients. I was a detective. I had to figure things out. The other thing is that assuming there's no trauma, you didn't slide down a hill on a trail and injure your knee that way. Healthy people don't usually get knee problems, because healthy people have balanced muscles. Their gait is pretty good. They don't have excess body fat to produce inflammation. Their diet is good, so they don't, eat sugar that produces inflammation. They're not eating bad fats that contribute to inflammation. And the bottom line is, a lot of these conditions, not just joint pain, but muscle dysfunction and energy, low energy, very common problem. These are all indicative of the body not being healthy, and we need to get healthy. And as we get healthy, these problems go away.
And if you're wanting to get healthy, I'm going to make reference to two of the most influential books on health and fitness that I've read and used as a reference on the shelf back here are the big, it's not called this, but I call it the Big Yellow Book and the Big Red Book, which Dr. Phil wrote. You need to get those. Those need to be on your shelf. You need to read through those and have them as reference books. But I wanted to give a short story that kind of emphasizes what you guys are talking about, and then I have a question. The story is, I was having knee pain. And luckily, one of our frequent guests, Coach Joe Yuhan, who's a physical therapist, was practicing not too far from where we live here in California. And I went to him, first time I'd ever been to a physical therapist. And I said, I have this knee pain. Can you fix it? And so he examined me, asked questions, and then had me do some little movement things. And he says, it's not the knee. The knee is the response. He said, there's something wrong with your opposite ankle. He says, you don't have full movement in that opposite ankle. And I said, well, I sprained it years ago. And he says, we need to work on the mobility, because you don't have good mobility in that ankle. You're compensating on the other leg. And then he says, the other thing, he says, I noticed that there's some hip issues here. And so he gave me some drills and some exercises to compensate and get my hip and to get more mobility in my ankle on the opposite leg. And that has helped with that knee pain. And so to your point, let's don't treat the symptom, let's find the cause. And like you said, most healthy people don't have knee pain. So let's figure that out. But here's my question. So the overarching theme of this episode is how do we deal with stress? You've mentioned the 3 types of stress. You gave us a great workbook exercise where we need to go through and fill out those columns of the physical, the biochemical, and the emotional, or
Yep. Mm-hmm.
the emotional stress.
Mental, emotional, yeah.
Mental, emotional. Once we've made that list, I think you said, let's eliminate the low-hanging fruit. Okay, if we're drinking too much caffeine, or if we're over fat, we can start working on some of those. What's the next step to controlling, not controlling, I'm going to say managing those stresses? What's the next step?
Yeah. The next step is to let your body control the stress. Let your body manage the stress. Let your body adapt, is the word, to the stress. So we have this incredible ability, starting in the brain, and if we have a healthy brain, it works better, to adapt to stress. And the problem we have often is when there's imbalance with too many negative stresses, harmful stresses. And as we cross things off the list, we now get rid of these stresses. We may not think that shoes that don't fit is not, how much of a stress can that be compared to my boss? Well, it's significant, because the other thing about stress is that it's cumulative. And you start piling the stress up, and now you've got this massive amount of stress. And where do you start? Um, therapy, you go to therapy? I don't think so. If you don't have a good brain and you're not managing your stress, even the right therapy is not going to work. I'm talking about a psychology type of talk therapy. We've got to eliminate, as you mentioned, and you should be maybe you should be my speechwriter. I like how you summarize these things. It's like you're using 3 words, I'm using 28.
I'm using Chat GPT as we're talking, and I'm saying summarize the transcript of what Dr. Phil says.
And me, I'm just using natural intelligence. So
or actual intelligence. That's his AI.
Reality.
Where were we? Was there a question on the table?
How do we? What's the next step?
We have this ability to handle the stress, but if we're overwhelmed with it, it's not going to work. So we have to get rid of all of the stresses that we can get rid of, and then in most cases, we're going to be able to handle the stress if we're also getting healthy at the same time. If our brain is not healthy, nothing is going to work.
Is there a better column to start with? Should we start with that psychological mental side first, or should we start with the physical side first, or how do we triage this?
I think what you said is a pretty good answer. The low-hanging fruit. You can stop wearing those shoes because you have 12 other pair in your closet. Yeah. Find one. There's probably one that works. You may not be able to quit your job just yet. You may not be able to move to Arizona just yet, but you can stop drinking 7 cups of coffee a day. You can stop eating sugar and all the junk food you're eating. You can stop having a bad night's sleep, because sleep is so important for stress, because that's how we recover from the previous day's stress. And if we don't recover, then that stress accumulates over to the next day. So it's that journey to being healthy, which is a lifelong journey, partly because we need to learn about all this stuff. There's a lot there. I'm still learning about it. I'm still making tweaks in my lifestyle on a regular basis, because I know, I need to do more of this and less of that or whatever. And it's a journey. It's a real journey, and it's something our brain is capable of doing because we have instincts, like every animal has. An animal will smell something and decide to eat it or not. Humans, they'll see something and eat it. That's a problem. So we need to not just be more like animals, but we need to use our incredible human brain, which has more instinct and intuition than animals have, and intelligence. Turn off your TV. That's a huge stress. Just amazing what people do in front of the TV every night. And if you're an extrovert, you keep repeating the news to your friends over and over again. That's a big stress.
I like how you stated that, the brain is it has amazing tools and capacity to manage some of this stress. And I had this image in my mind that the brain being like a forklift and stress being on the pallet, many layers all the way up to the point where you put the forks in that pallet and you try to lift it, but there's just no chance of it going because it's overloaded, too much weight. Even as powerful as that forklift or that brain is, there's no chance of moving anything. So you start going through there and looking for Scott's low-hanging fruit. I don't need this. I don't need this. And eventually, all of a sudden, that forklift will start moving things where before it was just overloaded. So there was no way it could solve the problem. It was just it was beyond its capacity.
Well, and that's why I think that the golden nugget that I'm getting from this is to Phil's point, take a day or two and make the list. You got to know what's on that pallet of stuff
Big factor.
before you can start taking stuff out and attacking it. I think that's a brilliant statement.
Yeah, and that's another good. And you guys are great. And a forklift with yeah, that's. I got to write these down.
Work that into your comedy routine, huh?
I will. And it's a simplistic example. Both of those examples are very simple. You talk about, okay, physical stress, biochemical stress, where food and drugs and caffeine, and then mental, emotional stress, anything and everything goes there. Make lists. And I mean, I would have patients come in, back before email, and they'd come in, they'd have a long list of mental, emotional things and a long list of physical things. They wouldn't have anything on their biochemistry. And I'd say, well, is your diet perfect? How much alcohol do you drink? How much caffeine? Oh, I didn't know they were part of it. So people don't know about these stresses, but it's really pretty simple. And then the what do we do about it part is just as simple. You just cross them off the list. Don't erase them, please. Cross them off the list so you can pat yourself on the back a week later when you say, oh, wow, I'm only down to 3 cups of coffee. This is like.
And that one, the stressor that's making you drink those 9 cups of coffee or whatever it might be, it's not, I didn't know that was part of the list. The real statement is, it's because of your list. You're doing these things to try to solve your problem.
It's so therapeutic to make the list.
Yeah.
Yes, it's amazingly therapeutic. And people come in and sometimes, and I haven't seen them in a month, and now they're coming in, they got their list, and they just feel so much better because they made their list. This is the wonders of talk therapy.
So, okay, we're unpacking a lot of stuff here, and this is where my brain is going right now. And it may not be a strong brain like you were talking about, Dr. Phil. A lot of times we go out on our runs to de-stress, to take some of that stress and solve some of the problems that are on the list. But by doing that, we're incurring stress on our body. We're going out and we're doing something physical, and we're imposing stress onto our body. Let's talk about the positive aspects of stress. Maybe it's physical, maybe it's mental, maybe it's biochemical. There are some biochemical good stresses out there, but exercise, you're a big proponent of this, that it helps with overall health, brain health, physical health, psychological health. But it is a stress on the body. How do we manage that stress?
Yeah, good question. We go out for a run and we get this mental, emotional stress reduction. Usually, not always. If we're with a bunch of people and that extrovert is going on and on, no, we don't get those benefits because we got to listen to yesterday's news. Um, that's why I like training by myself, because I could listen to my body, and it's really wonderful. And some people don't have an ability to shift states of consciousness, so there's no running high for them. They cannot get a runner's high because that's a different state of consciousness. That's that alpha state. Same with meditation. People often cannot meditate because they can't shift states. Alpha is why you get a runner's high. But yes, you're right. Exercise is a stress, and that's why we benefit. Well, wait a minute. I thought you said stress was bad. No, stress needs to be balanced. So
Balanced.
when we do something physically with our body, we're stressing it. And if the stress is not really great, we recover from it, and that recovery allows us to function physically much better. So if we're learning to play a piano through improvisation, and we do that for 5 minutes, we try to do something for 5 minutes. Now we stop and go out and walk around a little bit. Our subconscious mind is taking that 5-minute workout on the piano and figuring out what the heck we're going to do with that. Now, by the time you come back a half hour later, it has every circuit figured out. Why does this finger do that and this one do that at the same time? And this one is just a moment later. And now you've learned how to play the piano, and you've taken a stress, which is doing something you've never done. Doing something you've never done is a stress. Going for a run, going for a walk, if you don't walk every day, can be a stress. And the whole idea with using a heart monitor and using heart rate as a guide is that it's a biofeedback approach to controlling stress. Essentially, what I say is, here's your max aerobic heart rate. Above that is a negative stress. Below that is a positive stress.
Oh, interesting.
Any questions? Very simple. And does it induce stress? Yes. People come back and say, I can't train that way. I can't run that slow. And I have to say, well, run at night. Nobody will see you because I know that's what you're getting at. And then, eventually they start getting faster and faster. Then they complain, I can't run this fast. Another stress.
Yeah.
So the exercise analogy is a good example of the positive and negatives of stress. If you do too much, whether it's too long or too intense or the combination of both, which is usually what people do, that's excessive stress. And even if you slept for 20 hours, you wouldn't recover from that stress. Of course, if you do the right thing and you don't exceed that max aerobic heart rate, you warm up correctly, you cool down correctly, which is a big stress moderator. If you do that correctly, and then you only get 4 hours of sleep, that workout may be too stressful for you because you're not recovering from it.
So Phil, I want to go back to the forklift and the pallet. All right. And I'm getting ready for a big race. And I know I've got to really put some hours in and some time on the trail. And in fact, it's adding to my pallet. And I've got quite a bit there. And so to be successful, to get ready for a big event that does take a lot of training, I need to rid myself or remove that low-hanging fruit as much as possible from that pallet, or there's no way I can prepare to be my best and be successful at that event because I had too much on the pallet. Your pallet needs to be able to be moved at all times, whether you're loading it with physical stress or you have emotional stress around you. There's a limit to this lift.
Exactly. That that has been my approach in working with whoever I work with, athletes, CEOs, politicians. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Um, is we want to improve your human performance, whether all that human performance comes from the brain or the body. It's really both, no matter what. And we do that by brushing away as much stress as we can brush away, and at the same time get healthy. And now let nature take its course. You will adapt well, assuming you're sleeping well, and you will perform your best year after year after year without injury, without, falling apart, without overtraining.
So we talk about if you do some bicep curls, you can build a more efficient bicep. And if you start running, you can become more efficient at that and move your times down and find yourself successful at that. Is it possible to expand the strength of this forklift, the ability to manage and handle stress with practice, or is that finite? What you get is what you get as you come out of the womb.
I think you can expand it. I think we can learn to adapt better to stress, and certainly some people can do that really well. So we know that it's humanly possible. I think that it brings us back to the same answer, in that a healthy body adapts the best. So the healthier you are, the better you'll adapt to added stress. And adaptation is the name of the game. Getting rid of the low hanging fruit, the pallets, the whatever you want to call it, whatever imagery you conjure up, which is what people do when they hear these things. They have some image in their brain, and that's a good thing to focus on. But we can, just like an athlete can add more mileage over the course of the week and the month, add more distance to the races they do. They're doing a 5K and a 10K now. Well, now they're going to do a half marathon. Well, now they're going to do a marathon. Well, now they're going to do a 30K. It's all going to come down to what we would like to do. Here's what I would like to do.
One of the things as we're talking about this is the enemy to this whole thing, or at least one of the enemies, is comparison. We're in an age where everybody has their workouts on Strava and their Instagram posts and everything. And we don't know what is the horsepower of their forklift and what kind of pallet they're trying to pick up. You look at these professional athletes that don't have an annoying boss or relationship issues, or they can sleep 9 hours a night and also take a nap during the day so that they're able to recover. And so to compare ourselves and say, okay, if I want to do that half marathon, I need to put in this many miles a week because that's what this elite athlete does. And so we need to eliminate that comparison, and instead use, to your point, Phil, a heart rate based biology or biomechanical measure that is unique to us and to our situation, instead of trying to compare us to the Jones next door.
Yeah, we need to be individuals. We're all uniquely individual. Show 1,000 people the color red, and they will all see a different color red because their brains are uniquely different.
Okay,
so
I want to pause there. I want to pause there because I got off on some weird tangents in my weird brain, and I always thought, if I'm looking at red and I took my eyes and put them in Don's head, would I see red or would I see green? Well, we both grew up being told that's red. Anyway, keep going, Dr. Phil. That was just a little sideline. We can edit that out in post-production.
No, it's a nice aside. People need to understand individuality. They are individuals. We are all individuals. This is how I work. I'm an engineer. That doesn't mean you can smoke 2 cigarettes a day if you're a marathon runner because you think it's okay because I'm
well done cough right there. I love the cough right there. That was well placed.
He does comedy now, Scott, comedy.
So And if you watched my birthday video, at the end it says, "I am available for birthday parties." I've not gotten any requests yet, so I'm still waiting in case anyone wants to know, or if you haven't seen it, look for that little ending bit. We need to be individuals. And Scott, I just want to correct something that you said.
Sure.
Professional athletes do have mental emotional problems. They can have as bad a partner stress relationship as anybody else. They may not have a boss, but they have sponsors who can be
Right.
just as
Yep.
horrendous, more than most bosses can be, because they're made to perform more than they would normally do. They're made to say things they don't really believe. It's a bad situation. But we have to be individual. And that's the whole idea. Another idea of using a heart rate monitor is that it individualizes our workout. My original idea, which I still believe, is that as you train with the heart monitor, because it's a biofeedback device, by definition, what that means is you're going to train your brain to do the same thing without the heart monitor at some point.
Mhm.
And most people are unable to do that, unfortunately.
When you practice it, you can feel it and look down and confirm it. And as you look at your wrist, you go, "Yeah, I knew that was 141."
Yeah, that's the transition that now I'm giving myself confidence that I really know what it feels like to be at 141. And I've won a lot of bets. Usually I bet a really good bottle of wine that I could guess some stranger's heart rate. I see running around the track. I say, "Yeah, he's at 137 now." And the athlete would say, "How do you know that?" Because he looks like a runner at 137. And the runner would come around and we'd say, "What's your heart rate?" 137. So
Hey.
we can not only feel that in ourselves, but we can see it in other people.
And I'm going to put a little plug in here. We've mentioned it multiple times in the 18 previous episodes with you, Phil. He created the Maffetone method, which gives you a very accurate or a more precise way of calculating what that heart rate threshold should be for you as an individual. So we'll include a link in the show notes on where you can go.
And number one, use the most updated 180 formula, which you'll find on the website. And then also the MAF heart rate, the max aerobic heart, this training aerobic level that you're trying to get, is not 180 minus your age.
Right.
That's what so many people think that. And then they say, "Oh, this is not individual, 180 minus your..." No, it's 180 minus your age. And then you got to make some adjustments based on your level of health, and your level of fitness. And it's based on whether you could be honest with yourself, which a lot of people are unable to do. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I sometimes use it as an example of what people do. Really, this guy came in. I saw him one time, and then I didn't see him for 3 months because I didn't think I needed to. He came in 3 months later. He said, "I haven't gotten any faster. I don't understand what's going on. Blah blah blah." And I said, "Well, let's talk about this." "Okay, let's talk about the heart rate you're using." And he did 180 minus his age, and then he went through the formula, and then he added 10. So this is a 43-year-old guy, I think. He added at the end, he added 10 because he ran track in high school. True story. I mean, people come up with all kinds of reasons to follow no pain, no gain.
Mm.
My neighbor does that, so I'm going to do it.
Interesting. Hey, before we end this episode, we had a long discussion before we started it, and we'll figure out a way to include that in the episode. But I wanted to make sure that people knew first of all, about your music website, and then now this new stand-up comic side. Tell us a little bit about how did that start, and why is that a new passion for you?
I don't know how it started. I think it was when I was in high school. Um, and I won't give you any more details, but we would laugh a lot. And I was the funny guy, introvert as I was. And I developed this dry humor. So I'd be in the corner, there'd be a lot going on, and I would say something, and everybody would laugh. And then, 20 minutes later, I'd yell something out, everybody would laugh. Um, and I was in a very creative career, figuring out the 180 formula, figuring out the 2-week test, figuring out all these things that was a very creative endeavor. And the research I did, very creative. And suddenly I'm a songwriter. That came out of the blue. I loved music, so that wasn't it. It was that I tried learning to play guitar and piano and couldn't. And suddenly I woke up, now I'm a songwriter. Well, that turned on a whole different part of my brain in a way that I never had turned on before. That was the artistic part, the creative part that really got bigger than it was before. I'm not talking about ego, but the creative stuff that flows out. And as I started writing music more and more, I didn't realize it, but I started to appreciate painting more. The French Renaissance, I mean, just paintings I knew, paintings I had seen in person, in Paris and in Copenhagen and in Tokyo, that I loved. But all of a sudden now, I've seen this before, but I didn't notice that. And so my creativity, my artistic creativity really expanded. And then I mentioned, if you're not cutting it out of the beginning, but I mentioned lecturing for the first time since before COVID. And I realized that I was making people laugh, and they were all like little improv one-liners, but they all related to what I was talking about, so that people could remember the information better. And and then I did this happy birthday thing in my last lecture, and I had written a new happy birthday song because happy birthday, the copyright ended, and I thought, this is my chance. So I wrote a new song, which you can see in the video that you'll list.
Yep.
And I recorded the video, and it was funny, not like a stand-up act, but it was a funny thing. And I thought, well, can I really be funny in front of people? So, and this is exactly when my comedy started. It was last February. It was Valentine's Day. I mean, if you can't come up with a great comedy skit on Valentine's Day, you need to go back to school or something. So I thought, okay, I've got a gig in a bar. I thought, if I could do this 2-minute thing between songs in a loud bar and make people laugh, I'm on my way. If I can't, then I got to think about it. And so I did. I did 2 minutes in between songs in this loud bar. There was a hush, and then people started laughing. There was a woman at the bar snorting. I thought she was having a heart attack. It was just wonderful. It was a good little skit. I can't wait till Valentine's Day. This is the first time I've ever hoped it was going to be Valentine's Day soon.
So, Phil, you've stood in front of people, you've performed music, and you've had them applaud. You've also stood in front of a group with a microphone with nothing to defend yourself except your voice, and you've heard laughter. Which does it feel different? Which feels more rewarding?
I don't know. The comedy's new, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But I think of these things, and then I think, well, how could I say them better, and then I'll come up with a better way. Um, and so it's a work in progress, but it's working really well for some reason. The music, when people come to hear me play music, that's the greatest because I'm lecturing my music. I'm speaking, I'm educating them. I'm giving my social injustice songs. I'm giving my love songs. I mean, I'm giving them me, and I'm feeling it from them. It doesn't get any better than that. It's just wonderful. I I've lectured to huge crowds and had standing ovations, and I guess maybe that's boring now. I don't know, but and I love getting I get these messages almost every day now where they say so and so, this researcher so and so has cited you in their article just published. That's wonderful. I mean, I just love it, but you get used to it. So I'm the music is still with me. I'm still writing new songs. I think I'm still right. I have a new album coming out next week, actually.
Oh, nice.
I don't like doing self-promotion, so I'm not going to tell you the name of the album.
I'll self-promote you. What is it?
Or my name. And yes, I am having a big album release party, but don't worry, I'm not inviting anyone. The album's called Beware Mediocrity. Talk about a social situation. But I'm still, the music is still very intense. The writing is too, the health and fitness writing. I'm still doing it. I'm still, I've started a really heavy duty scientific paper on the brain, how a healthy brain affects the individual and society. It's like heavy, man. I'm up to 12,000 words and I don't, I got to drink extra coffee to get through this.
I would imagine standing in front of an auditorium, delivering a speech, you may not know, or a lesson, or sometime about a topic. At the end, you get an applause, people stand, it hit home. When you're singing a song at the end, you may realize that how well it was accepted. But with a joke, it's instant feedback. That landed or it didn't. That failed or it didn't. And it's ebb and flow. There's a roller coaster to that event where the others are just one big ride, straight down or straight up.
Yeah, so when you're lecturing to people, just like when we're having one-on-one conversations, or four-on-one conversations, you know what the other person's thinking. You're intuitively reading their body language, reading their facial expressions. You're sensing in other ways what's going on. And I remember the first time, and I hadn't performed at all. I was well into my writing career. I was 2.5 years into writing songs. I had recorded in the studio, and I had played a song for this really great musician, and he knew I didn't perform. He said, a great song is when you half of it is when you write a great song. The other half is when you perform it to other people, and only then will when you see these people how that song is. And it's that way. I didn't realize that I did that when I lectured all the time. My lectures were like these shows. I don't come here with a list of things I want to talk about. And when we do, we don't even talk about it. But I have an outline because the topic, here's the topic. This is what people came to hear. So I've got to talk about that. But I go all different ways based on what the audience tells me, not just the questions, but what they look like. Are they falling asleep? Are they, anxious or ready to ask questions? Are they, and so we do that every day with each other. And it's a big part of natural communication. Sometimes the words get in the way. That's always the problem, those fake words.
I probably misspoke. I imagine you can read in real time whether people are on that the same, bandwidth, or this listening with the intensity? They're leaning forward and listening for the next sentence, or are they, looking down at their phone during a song? I'm sure it's not as clear as a punchline laugh.
Yeah, they're different. They're different things. And you sense them different ways, and you adjust differently. And some of them, like when people are coming to hear me and see me as a songwriter, versus playing in a bar. In a bar, I'm just another person. I can reach some of them, but I have to work hard. I tell stories between my songs. Now I'm telling funny stories between songs. I can usually get them. My songs have funny things. They're not all that obvious, but I sort of have dry humor like Paul Simon. He's got a lot of funny stuff in his songs that it just goes over their heads, but just he's a funny guy, and you can't help be funny in music. And sometimes it's so subtle that it's not even noticeable. But there will be people in a crowded, hazy bar that just you can enlist one by one as the evening goes on, and that's a lot of fun. Even though you may only get a dozen or two compared to 100 people where you're performing your own gig solo. It's different. It's all fun. It's all important, and it's all something we want to keep doing.
And it can lower your stress, right?
It can lower your stress. It's a great example of a good stress because, it's like the night before a marathon. You don't sleep well. You don't sleep well no matter who you are. And the night before a gig, a real gig, even a local comedy, it's only you're only spending 5 minutes. It's like singing one song. I mean, come on. But man, and especially being so new, I don't know what I'm doing. But
so if someone wants to learn a little bit more about this comedy, I think you mentioned earlier that's on the music website, and we'll include that in the show notes.
Maffetonemusic.com and the other philmaffetone.com website, where all the other health and fitness articles are. There's no new ones being put up there. I'm putting my new ones on the music site. And I will change the name of that as soon as I can get the host to understand that I'm speaking English just like they try to do. And maybe you can figure out why we don't, why these bugs in your system. You can't say that to a host. You got bugs in your system. Oh, no, nothing. Our platform is perfect. Really?
And at Maffetone Music, you can sign up for the newsletter, which automatically gives you some updates, which Don and myself need to sign up for because we're missing a lot of great gold.
You do, and you can read the funny articles. You can see the happy birthday video, which is very important. People, there's so much ageism.
Yes.
And when you're a grandfather, it gets worse. Even you, Don.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a grandfather.
Oh, you are?
Yes. Yes.
God, we're a bunch of old.
Yes.
Who's this guy down in the pit there?
Yeah, we've got Ryan there. If we average our age, we're good. We're lucky to have Ryan. I'll tell you that.
Average is where it's at.
Yeah. And when it comes to stress, as we wrap the whole thing up, Scott, there was a spot right there. And average and moderation. Now, we don't use moderation. Balance is the key. A little bit of stress, like it's like making a good ragu. You've got to have a little bit of
ragu.
Yeah, you've got to have your garlic. You've got to have your basil. You've got to have the things just right. Too much of one is a problem.
And leave out the sugar.
But my grandmother did that, so I do that.
Dr. Phil, this is number 19. You need to come up with a great topic, although we really never need a topic when we're talking to you. But number 20 needs to be something big.
I've got it.
Maybe you can sing happy birthday for us.
I've got it written down on my paper, Scott, and we'll ask Phil if it's acceptable.
Glad somebody's keeping track.
And it's about intuition. It's about training with intuition, eating with intuition, living pure with intuition, trusting and listening to your body.
That's a good topic.
To make the right choices.
I don't know that I've ever done that. I've mentioned it, but That's good.
Okay, that's number 20. We'll hook up with you in the next month or so and get you on for number 20. And
Sounds
like
great.
Saturday Night Live, we have a 20-time smoker's jacket that we'll be producing for you.
We don't
That's
even have
heavy,
it yet.
man.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Always so
Thanks,
good.
guys.
Always
This has been great.
insightful.
This is always fun. This is like a stand-up routine, except we're sitting down.
Well, we enjoy you. We think that you're great on all the many different levels of where your career and life have taken you. We think it's fascinating. We just love conversation with you.
Thank you.
Think about your stress. Make your list. After you've made the list and prioritized what you can get rid of, put on your shoes, lace them up, and go out and run.
Mas.